Cameroon, especially following the presidential elections that took place on October 12th. While we continue to wait for the results, I just want to continue to thank you for your support and all the encouragement as you continue to push this message forward in any way, whether you commented, you liked, you shared, and you also left a comment. In any way, we thank you so much for your contribution, and we continue to push the message and make Cameroonians stay firm and stay connected, because they say they want change, and change has come to their doorsteps. But first, we'll begin with fresh information, news that is breaking from Yaoundé to Garoua. We can tell you about the protests that happened and people were arrested. And in downtown Yaoundé, we could see the SDO come down to kind of make an appeal to the people, addressing some youth. He even made mention of the fact that disobedience could be collective, but punishment would be individual, trying to deter and scare those who were out chanting Issa Tchiroma Bakari and showing their support for him and the victory call. We also know of all the arrests that took place in places like Garoua, even though some other sources tried to debunk the fact that they were not arrests. But in essence, we know that the police and the gendarmerie tried to dispel the crowds as young men and women continue to take to the street to show their support for Issa Tchiroma Bakari. And speaking of Issa Tchiroma Bakari, the presidential hopeful, who is now considered the president-elect based on what he himself has published, declaring victory. And we could see a poster that his team put out recently with him showing 54% of the vote count after all the tallies from mainly the 18 important divisions that they were focusing on. And on the other side, you have the incumbent President Paul Biya standing on the corner with around 31% of the vote. And that particular poster doesn't sit well with Yaoundé. And as you know, there has also been a report that Jeune Afrique is putting out indicating that the Biya team must have contacted the Tchiroma team, indicating a kind of compromise where they are offering him the post of Prime Minister. And Tchiroma refused to accept this offer. In this instance, we're still following the veracity of the fact. As you know, if such communication took place, it may only happen through backdoor channels, for which we may never know the truth, because no one will ever come out and take ownership for such deals. And we know that it undermines democracy fundamentally, because if Issa Tchiroma Bakari actually won these elections, then he cannot stay short and become the Prime Minister, which we all know that the post of Prime Minister in Cameroon is not an important position, and therefore that is not what the people voted for. If the will of the people is to be respected, then Issa Tchiroma Bakari should be the next president of Cameroon. Now, speaking of curfews, we do know that the senior divisional officer of Benue has issued a communique banning all motorbike activity as from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m., and which is a very devastating blow in an area of the country that relies solely on motorbike riding as part of the best means of transportation. So this may greatly impact the economy there, and while we continue to wait for these results. And speaking of results, we know that we are about 24 hours away before the commencement of this official results proclamation, because as we speak today in Yaoundé, the Constitutional Council is going to be hearing petitions. And for the petitions before the council, it is safe for us to say it might be a very easy exercise for them today, because we do know that only Patricia Tomaino Damjoya of the UDC party stands as the lone important political party candidate who still has a petition. We do hear from another source that the PCRN is denouncing that petition letter that was out there, the withdrawal letter, was fake. So we may just wait and see while the proceeding starts and see if the PCRN will be represented. And we can also confirm that many elites have been deployed to their various communities to try to preach the message of peace. And one can only wonder, why are they trying to preach a message of peace, whereas the results have not yet been proclaimed and there is no mass protest taking place? We all do know that yes, there is heightened tension, but this only continues to discomfort the people. Because if these elections was free, fair and transparent, then there should be no panic. But it's the contrary, because from curfews, communiques, we even know that the Minister of Territorial Administration has still come out again in another communique, issuing very strong and stern warnings, saying that no civil disobedience will be tolerated. At all costs, Cameroonians are wondering, is peace and silence the same thing? Because while we do know that everyone is on edge, at the same time, the government's actions is also not helping matters. Because these communiques that are coming left, right, center, especially those from the SDO that are targeting specific communities, like we saw the one in Ideya, which doesn't help to quell the tensions, because it only goes a long way to fuel tension of tribalism and some form of discrimination against people from the Anglophone regions, the northern region, and the Bamileke heartlands. These are very trying times for the country, and it's not helpful that senior divisional officers are issuing such communiques. And therefore, dear Cameroonians home and abroad, this brings me to an important moment where I want to highlight the 43-year-old elephant in the room, the rule of President Paul Biya since 1982. Because one cannot understand how Issa Bakari, someone would have been considered as the worst candidate to ever go against him and be a front runner. Yet the people decided to side with him. That tells you that there's something fundamentally wrong about the 43-year-old rule. For starters, let's address road infrastructure. We do have reports from reputable international organizations that clearly state that less than 10% of Cameroon's over 121,000 kilometer roads are paved. This is unthinkable in a country that's supposed to be championing rural-urban transportation, especially with farm-to-market roads. Because during the rainy season, some roads are impassable. And it's impossible to think about that in a country that is supposed to be championing the transformation of raw materials. It doesn't make sense that Cameroon is importing rice and flour, whereas the country is blessed and naturally endowed with all kinds of food crops and cash crops. Now let's talk about healthcare. The World Health Organization report suggests that Cameroon has one of the lowest doctor-to-patient ratio in Central Africa, where you're talking about one doctor for over 10,000 people. Are we going to talk about infant mortality rates, where women are struggling to give birth in the hospital and be taken care of? Yes, you can cite that situations are improving, but those improvements are slow for over 53 years in office. Should we talk about electricity, repeated blackouts in urban centers, crippling businesses, and costing millions of lost productivity? How about the economy? Over 30% of youth unemployment, with an informal sector that's absorbing many graduates that are supposed to be in the formal sector. What about governance? No good governance report, because you have top government officials in jail for embezzlement, corruption, and all kinds of malpractices. The monies have never been recovered. So you only hear about this money and saying Operation Sparrowhawk is in force. People have been arrested and jailed for embezzling billions of CFA, money that they may never even ever consume. And that money has not been repatriated into the economy. And that is sad, because it's a lost venture. So these are some of the important issues that I think the youth were able to see through in these elections. And that is why it's not unthinkable that it could have costed the regime its legitimacy to power. That the youth saw through all of this and decided that enough is enough. Because guess what? It's their future that's at stake. They constitute about 60% of the population. What do you expect? So if they're calling for change, so be it. So the powers that be need to look in the mirror and ask themselves, where did we go wrong? And let's make something clear. This is not about party politics. It's about survival. It's about dignity. Because the people are not asking for a miracle. They're just asking for fairness, for truth, for objectivity, for the respect of the rule of law, for the respect of what happened at the ballot box on October 12th. Because we do know that some of the youth that voted for Issa Bakari may not even know what FSNC stands for, the full initials. But they only know that Issa Bakari resonated with them, because rarely have we seen public officials in Cameroon come out to apologize for any wrongdoing in any way, shape or form. Talk less of resigning when they are being called out. And in this instance, Issa Bakari did those things within the blink of an eye. He took ownership of his deeds and his actions. And of course, it's impossible for any of these political leaders to come out and say they are trying to run for president to govern Cameroon, whereas they haven't worked in Cameroon. Whether you worked within the system or outside the system, you have worked in Cameroon. And there is no wealthy person or any person worthy of their soul who has actually gone through the ranks within Cameroon. And in a regime that has been in office for over 43 years, it's impossible that you did not cross paths. Because if you didn't meet them on the street when you're doing business in transactions and getting deals and contracts, you've met them at the public administration offices where you've gone to do your own business of the day, or you've also been part of the different appointed positions. Because just because we don't have all the roster of all those that have worked with government, it doesn't mean that their position all of a sudden becomes invalid because they choose to run against the regime. So it's important to keep this in mind, because we shouldn't fall for any form of propaganda that tries to discredit a candidate simply because they have worked for the regime. And I'm just saying this because these are some of the remarks that we keep hearing over and over. So what is the alternative? Is the alternative 43 plus 7? Because that is what it means. Because if Issa Bakari's discredit is the fact that he worked in the regime, he was there when things were bad, he didn't say anything, then one has to ask the question, who do we expect to come and govern Cameroon? Somebody that fell from the skies? That is not possible. And let's not forget, it's important to restitute the facts. Issa Tchiroma Bakari has never been a member of the ruling CPDM party. He has worked with President Biya as a coalition or an alliance, using his own party, the FSNC. Because way back in 1992, when he was associated with the UNDP that helped to keep the Biya regime in power and in office. And I guess critics can say, yes, he may have made political choices that they do not like, because they were able to keep his regime in office. And then we don't forget the fact that he also suffered gravely in the hands of this regime, because he went to jail in 1984. He was picked up in Douala as an engineer of railways at the time, and he went to jail for over six or so years. And so his political history has a lot that we can learn from. So if he's coming today and has been a minister twice in different circumstances, and that tells you that he may just have 9 lives, because he keeps coming back, and maybe this time he's the man of the hour that will bring change to Cameroon's political landscape. And that may just be where the rubber meets the road. And so it's important for us to appeal to the powers that be, to ask themselves, what Cameroon do you want to leave behind? You've been in power for over 43 years. Isn't it time to retire? Isn't it time to step aside? Because when critics and observers start to make their voices so loud that it's deafening, it's important to look in the mirror. If the young people say they want to take their future back in their own hands, it's because they are making use of their sovereignty, the powers that have been bestowed on them in Article 2 of the Constitution. The people shall be the sovereign, and they can give that power to you to be their president, and they can take back that power. Yes, the law says in a referendum or so, these elections look like it was a referendum of some sort. If not, why the continuous tension in the country? So we also talk about the security forces and appeal to the forces of power, law and order, to stay true to their mission to protect their citizens. They are your brothers and sisters. No one should ever lose their life or their blood for something that was avoidable. It is just but sad to know that people are scared to risk their lives simply because they want to exercise their very constitutional rights: freedom of association, freedom of communication, freedom of everything that is enshrined in Article 19 of the law of 1996. And therefore, to the youth, the appeal also comes to you. You have to stay vigilant. You have to stay focused. You have to stay resolute. Your voices are going to be heard. Your voices will be respected. No one is going to steal your future. You have to trust the process. This wind of change that have come to your doorsteps is not going to pass you by, because real revolution is not in burning buildings. It's in building awareness. As you continue to build awareness among yourselves, you grow and stand firm as a block that cannot be corrupted, that cannot be bribed, that cannot be deceived, because power is in your hands. You are the sovereign. And in all things, we try to say, as we await the verdict within the next 24 hours, which it shows is going to be the case, let the Constitutional Council stand firm and resolute to restore democracy and confidence in its body. Because at such a time, when it's being perceived that we are going to hear the phrase irrecevable, it's unthinkable, because there are instances that will require the Constitutional Council to be fair, to be impartial, to be just. We do know that it will not be a shocker to see that someone like Patricia Tomanon Danjoya or Cabral Libi of PSRN get one or two petitions that are considered admissible or recevable. Maybe, but we hope it's not just to please public and international opinion. Let it be for truth, and let justice be served. Because although one part would lead to continuity of 43 years and counting, the other part will lead to change and maybe a future that is uncertain. But I think the people are ready to take that gamble, and you should not stand in their way. Democracy is always uncertain, and that is what makes it real, because it is government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And if the people have chosen Issa Tchiroma Bakari for a change, so be it. And therefore, we continue to call on all Cameroonians home and abroad to stay vigilant and to lend their voice to the conversation. Because you cannot stay on the sidelines when the future of your own country is at stake. Because there will be no more 43 years, and this is a turning point. No matter what happens, we do believe that if these numbers are true, then the voice of the people must be respected. And that is why everyone is appealing. So many Africans across the globe are paying particular attention as to what's going on in Cameroon, because they are hard-pressed to understand why it is even purported that a majority of Cameroonians could have voted for an individual who is 92 years old, who has been governing for 43 years, and is almost edging to serve another 7 years. It is unthinkable in a digital era, in an age where the population is young and vibrant and yearning for change. What could really happen to a people to stoop so low? It means that if power is within the hands of a few and they continue to manipulate things, they may just be out of touch with reality. But maybe there is a stronger force that has come through Issa Tchiroma Bakari to raise the people to a new level of consciousness, and they are awakened and don't want to go back to that slumber. And if that is the case, then let the Constitutional Council make a pronouncement that will go in that direction. Because according to what was seen, as to all the video evidence and photos that circulated online, on that night and within the 48 hours that ensued when these elections was wrapped up, everything points to the fact that the people spoke, and they spoke loud and clear. The world is watching. Cameroonians are vigilant enough to pay attention to the details. Let's all continue to hope that tomorrow we shall be hearing the results, and it's going to be a favorable one. On to the next one. God bless Cameroon.